Okay guys, this is the yeast respiration experiment that we did in class. And since I recorded the data when you weren't here, because we recorded data at 30 minutes, 60 minutes, and then 3 hours, you didn't get to see what the balloons looked like and what was going on in the test tubes. So I made this video so you would know what was happening. This setup right here in this test tube rack is from period 7. And this has now been 30 minutes, a little more than 30 minutes since the test tubes were created. As you can see in test tube A, there's no gas in the balloon, and there are some bubbles towards the top of the test tube, but not too many. Test tubes B, C, D, and E, the balloons have all inflated to different degrees. Just by looking at it, not giving any measurements, but B seems to be the smallest, other than A that has none in it. D is probably the second biggest, and then C and E are somewhere in there. The actual data is in our data table, which you'll see next. All right. In terms of what's happening in each test tube, other than obviously the balloons on top that are expanding, we have bubbles. Okay, and each test tube has a different amount of bubbles in them. So like I said, test tube A just has a little bit of bubbling towards the top. Test tube B, it was pretty much 3/4 of the way full of bubbles. The amount has decreased since I took the measurements. Test tube C is about 3/4 of the way full of bubbles. Test tube D, when I took the measurements, the bubbles came down to about here. It was half the test tube. Again, those have decreased. And test tube E was probably about there. So closer to being 3/4 of the way full of bubbles. And again, all of those have started to decrease. Okay. We'll continue this in 60 minutes. Well, we've already done 30, so in another 30 minutes.